I welcome everyone to our webinar today. It's part of Alacadia's Prepare to Plan series. So while many of us are getting ready for the summer, planning should be top of mind for you right now. So we're at this midway point at the beginning of the calendar year, many people's fiscals. So there's an element of replanning going on at this midway point through the years. And then even at the organizations that are multi-billion-dollar or global, the planning process, amazingly enough, is just starting to kick off. And then on top of that, we're hopefully all just starting to come out of this lovely global pandemic that not just as marketers we've been dealing with, but as humans. So it's timely. We've got three fabulous marketing leaders here. I'll have them introduce themselves in a moment, and we'll dive into some of the learnings that they've personally felt and dealt with during COVID, and then what they're walking away with when it comes to marketing planning, improving that, and making sure that their marketing organizations are set as we march towards a bit more of that return to normal in our marketing worlds. So before I have this illustrious panel introduce themselves, a little bit of housekeeping. If you've got technical questions or technical issues, pop them in the chat. Our team's in the background, they'll help you answer. Similarly, if you have questions that come up, we'll try and get to those. We're going to try and zip through this in 45 minutes or less so everyone can get back to their next call or whatnot, but maybe we'll try and answer some questions, maybe even in the chat. And then for those of you who don't know me, don't know Alacadia, I'm Sam Melnick. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success and Insights. I'm going to be moderating today. And Alacadia, we're a SaaS MarTech provider that helps marketing organizations with their financial planning, their budgeting, and ultimately investment and performance metrics. So now that I've gone through the little intro, let's do a round of intros here. So I'm going to kind of go around the horn here. Everyone state their name, their company, their background. And then I want them to add a little quick tidbit about the biggest challenge around planning in 2021, at least once we got past that initial shutdowning of COVID. Tessa, why don't we kick off with you?
All right, thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. And thank you to Alacadia for having me on. I'm Tessa Barron, VP of Marketing at On24. And we help marketers create engaging webinars, virtual events, and content experiences that turn that engagement into data so that they can ultimately deliver sales, better leads, and drive those results. And, for me, COVID was a roller coaster, and we worked with a lot of our customers on adapting their programs and shifting to a digital first world. And what we really learned was that suddenly there was no benchmark. Scale was not a problem. And so it really became a question of understanding where conversion was at the time and trying to move the needle on volume to fit it. So, I'm excited to hear what all of our other experts have to say about that, because benchmarks, what are they?
Awesome, thanks, Tessa. Jeremy, why don't we go to you next?
Hi, team. Thank you for Alacadia for having me. I'm Jeremy Audrin. I'm the VP of Marketing Strategy and Operations at ZoomInfo. Most of us know for our data and our data integrity and enrichment systems. We also are providers of go-to-market. As we announced just yesterday, we also are expanding into the chat business, and this is just the beginning of the road for us. We have a very wide array of offering. The biggest thing I would say, like for this year, as we have gone through, and I went through a change of position, a company as well, is the constant replanning. That's what COVID made me do. It's like, plan, yeah, whatever. Like whatever you did at the beginning of the year, burn it through the window. Like it did not matter. But it really taught us a lot of things, that to think on our feet and say, how do we get to the target despite what's happening, despite all those things? And surprisingly enough, when put under pressure, most marketers came through and came up with some very innovative way, using either what Tessa was saying, like virtual first, and how do we go about it? And then attaching ourselves to think about the world differently, in a more compassionate way, in a more human way, which really helped planning really change the persona that we were approaching.
Awesome, some good stuff. Gabe, I'll let you bring it home on the intro.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, guys. My name is Gabriel. I go by Gabe for short. I'm the head of experimental marketing and special projects here at Bombora. We're the leading provider of intent data. I'd say my biggest challenge was having to completely redirect my attention within my planning role. Normally, I'm very hands-on with field marketing and events, but I pivoted once all of those went out the window into more of a digital engagement focus, leading our project managing of our website redesign. So we try to maximize our usage out of the downtime that we had. And now as that project nears its end, I'm really looking forward to get back in the swing of things in terms of planning for late 2021 and early 2022.
Awesome, thank you. So we've got throw those benchmarks out the window. We've got the constant change, and then we've kind of got paraphrase Gabe, moving from in-person to 100% digital. All those challenges. So maybe we can give some hints on how we took those on, and some of those learnings we took along the way. So just kind of a little bit of overview of how we're going to structure this conversation today. So each one of our 3 questions that we'll ask the panel, our great marketers here, it'll be backed by a rule around planning that we've taken. And this is actually backed by data from a survey of over 250 marketers. Again, real world learnings from these 3 great marketing leaders, and then we'll bring some takeaways. So let's dig in now. So the first rule that we're talking about here for planning is stop explaining what marketing does after the fact and be hyper aligned with sales and finance on strategic goals. And the stat that we pulled out of our survey here is that more than half of marketing and finance organizations are still misaligned. So, key thing, we talk about marketing and sales alignment, marketing and finance alignment is important, but we really have to, as marketing organizations, stop explaining what marketing does once we've executed and be aligned to start. So Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. Here's the question I have. So during COVID, what changed for you when it came to alignment with key partners, whether it be sales, whether it be finance, and then what might you tweak there moving forward?
So the biggest challenge that I had during actually the early days of COVID, and that perpetuated itself through the whole pandemic, was the amount of scrutiny that we were getting on everything that marketing was doing. Whether it be how much we were spending on what, or how much leads we were getting, the quality of it. It was hyper focused on marketing, like, we'll do whatever you need to do, but you need to deliver this, that, and then that was like the sales side, and on the finance side was like, how much can you cut and not die kind of thing. Like, what arm are you going to cut? Like, can you go without a leg kind of thing? Like, they were like really going like very aggressive, and we're making, because nobody knew where we were going. Nobody knew how it was going to last. Nobody knew what was going to be the impact on the business. Therefore, they were asking us to make really like stark contrast and decision to say, if push comes to shove, this is what we're going to do. And quite frankly, some of the questions we got from people, they were hyper focused on what's the CAC, what's the LTV, and like every lead, is it qualified? Are we scoring things? Like, the amount of scrutiny was just slightly overbearing. And I think it wasn't so much about explaining, but it came about justifying why you're here, what do you do? Can we go without this? Can we go without that? But that's at least my take.
That's great. I mean, I think in marketing, you always feel a certain level of scrutiny, but it's interesting that you've heard or felt that it just like was magnified by whatever X. Gabe, did you feel that same way? Was there other things that you felt like changed, and anything that you took away in terms of how you align today and moving forward?
Yeah, so from an organization of our size, I'd say our planning got a little bit scrappy. We no longer had those well-defined buckets of spend that we've seen in the past. Instead, things were somewhat lumped together, which gave us a chance to be opportunistic, a little experimental with our campaigns. But that being said, translating that into the relationship across departments, I'd say it's a little different. We gathered a sense of flexibility and understanding. So that's something we didn't necessarily see prior to COVID. We didn't have that spotlight that Jeremiah, just mentioned. We're still communicating things really closely, but the teams sort of understand that we no longer have these plans that are built out from a year-long basis. So we're working on more of a month-to-month structure. We have plan A, B, and C for that month. And once we meet during these weekly calls, we work hand in hand to figure out what we're going to scrap, what we're going to hold off or push into the next month, and then what's still a go. We'll justify the spend. We position it as this is what we want to do for month of June, month of July, and then we move forward as a team. So I think that's somewhat the nature of our climate, just based on the size of our organization and the resources we have available. I'd say moving into the whole post-COVID marketing world, I really hope that persists. I think it's almost a little blissful to be true, but at the very least, I'm hopeful that we can maintain this team dynamic and alignment and buy-in that we've seen because of how we're operating in like that scrappy mentality.
That's a great point on the timing, and I'm already probably going to break from kind of some of the prep we as a group did. I'm notorious for doing this, so I apologize to the panel. But I think about the timing, and I know with Allocadia, our customers, this changed a lot. A lot of people were moving quickly, and then they tried to set up how they were using our system, particularly around the financials and the budgeting, so they could reevaluate at a faster pace. I know our marketing team, again, smaller marketing team, they moved to reevaluating the plan on a 4 to 6 week basis, and then a 6 to 8 week basis as things started to settle a bit. But I guess Tessa or Jeremy, did the planning change for you all during, like, once you got past that timing, did that change?
Well, yes, it did. Go ahead, Tessa, actually.
No, Jeremy, you go first.
So it did, for us, was on the weekly. On the weekly, I was asked, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, where are you spending? What you're moving? And like, did you get an estimate for this? Can you get a revise for that? We had large user conference that happened to fall at the beginning of the pandemic. And we're talking like several $1 million of spend, including pre-committed to hotel, caterers, events, like speakers. And suddenly we had to shift all that to digital. So every week we had to basically say, like, can we keep it within the bounds of realistic, while we already have shell out like 50% on hotel or this kind of crazy stuff?
Go ahead, Tessa.
Well, I think that just what happened is all the demand changed. And I think that that's something that we have to recognize, is that yes, there was a pandemic, but the buying type, our buyer, changed. And the velocity that they were moving at, and the velocity that they were consuming content, the velocity that they were searching online, the velocity at which they were engaging with our paid channels was very fast. And so, that does mean moving to that week to week look at the volume and optimizing it accordingly. Sometimes we have to pull back, because if suddenly we have a surge in spend and we've saturated our sales team, then that's, that money's also not, those leads aren't going to convert simply because we don't have the capacity to handle them. So, I think that it's not often that you have a buyer that's moving fast, you have a sales cycle that's moving fast, and then your own team is moving super fast. We were all in like digital warp speed. And so our planning had to move at that same, have that same momentum to it. And quite frankly, planning is not really built for digital. And so I think, that's, I have to say, plug for Allocadia, that's exactly when, we knew we needed something dynamic. And I think that is now the new reality. I really do.
I think
if you think about it, at ZoomInfo, I only joined here a month ago, but I'm already in the cadence. We have daily review of the intake leads and demo processes down the pipe. It's daily. Then every week we have a roundup, and then every month we have a roundup. So, but daily in my Slack stream, I have a whole conversation that starts around 8 a.m. That is like, this is how we're doing today.
Yeah, digital is real time. And I think that that's something that we've been able to sort of almost cushion. Physical events have a lag when you're not 100% digital. So you kind of get to think about budget in a silo. And you'll have time to sort of recalibrate, and that can happen at a much slower pace. But now when it's 100% digital, you're literally getting that return instantaneously. And I think that that's really the challenge is, yes, we are now able to do so much more, and we have so much more visibility, but what do you, ultimately a human has to do something with it.
I think that's a great, this is really interesting. I'm gonna send this one to my product team too to listen. This is important, but no, so Tessa, you're in a situation, it's like almost like you had an influx because of the business that on 24s and Alacadia, we were sitting in this kind of, I felt like it was either the have or the have not when it came to our both our demand, but then also on the customer success side, I had renewals that I didn't think, the customers that I was like, I don't think they're going to renew, but because of the change that happened, they could not create more change, and they doubled into what I would call the digitization of plans and budgets. But similarly, there was deals that moved like that, but then there's others that just some were like a movie like yourself that you're like, I just have to have this visibility. I have to be able to have more agility, and they move. But others were like, we have to put stuff on hold and focus. So I think it depends certainly on the product and the your go-to-market motion, depending on, was it overwhelmingly like, okay, we have to kind of narrow, do we have to throttle back, versus is it just more of a scrutiny of like, okay, we don't know what's going to happen, so we have to kind of clamp down and make sure that anybody that's spending, planning is truly using their resources. Correct.
Yeah, I will say one thing though, and I think this is what digital does, is that the fuzzy math goes away. You know, those bets that were conjectures and, you know, you made intuitively because it was the right thing to do. When it's digital, it's not so much anymore. So I think that is a part of it. Things become a lot more black and white. So even though there is change and uncertainty, you actually have a lot of clarity about what's going on in your business from a day-to-day basis that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
So I'm going to finish off this topic and just actually ask Gabe a quick question, then we'll move on to the next rule. But this is a great discussion. Thank you. Gabe, what do you like? Is you like with you had such a switch from the physical, the experiential in person to digital? Did you feel like was this a double-edged sword? Was this like, was there better visibility into the result? Like, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when this whole thing first kicked out, I'd say prioritization focused on getting as much leads in our database as possible. Right now, we realize those database or those contacts are sitting there. We don't have the resources necessarily to, you know, engage. Our pipe gap is hitting because of our lack of meetings and that in-person interaction that we so desperately crave. I'd say from a planning perspective, because I was so hands-on with building out some of these field marketing and digital campaigns, we wanted to maximize our usage of our time. And as a company, that was, hey, let's go through a website redesign. So my whole world just completely switched. I'm, you know, looking this way, and now I'm starting to look that way. But moving forward, I'd say our strategy is shifting back into the, of course, hybrid model, where we're focusing a little bit on that whole digital engagement and morphing that back into the physical world. So that's my, you know, biggest excitement, and what I'm looking forward to the most is just how much we miss that whole human to human interaction.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think that human to human is something that we're just starting to see it come back. So it'll be interesting to see how these learnings, particularly on the digital side, we can merge them from how we traditionally or previously had gone to market, because I think human to human is definitely still needed. Okay. Rule number 2 here. I don't think this is any news, but it's even more important now. And I think you heard it already from the folks on this on the panel, but managing up, demonstrate marketing impacts on the business. So I don't think anyone's surprised here, but over 80% of marketers are under pressure internally to prove that marketing ROI and ultimately to justify that marketing spend. And Jeremy, you already talked about this. I'm actually going to start with Tessa on this one, but I know Jeremy mentioned this, so I think we'll get him in this second. But Tessa, have you had to change the way you plan your marketing approach? You already talked about the digitalization, but even more so, yeah, your planning changed. You could dig in a little bit more there, but even so,
yeah, I mean, I think we used to plan per channel and said, oh, we'll invest this much in in advertising and this much per into trade shows. And so it was really more about execution than I think about our buyer. And when COVID happened, kind of every channel, yes, they differ in the conversion rate. But every channel sort of became less about the tactic and more about the stage in which a buyer was engaging with it. And so we built a funnel that backed out of bookings. And I know I said throw the benchmarks away, but I picked the best that I could, and use some instinct there. But we backed out of our bookings goals and now knew at each stage of the funnel how many buyers, and not just how many buyers, but how many new people did we need to have at each stage to ultimately get to our target based upon a conversion rate. And what that allowed us to do is, instead of saying, okay, we need to run and invest this much in content syndication, it was, we need to, leveraging all of our channels, we need to get this many new people in our funnel. And I think that really has made us a lot more customer centric, but also a lot more agile in spend, because instead of clinging to to that line item that you've allocated, you're now clinging to how many buyers do I need to engage that have never heard of us before versus how many are in an MQL or in an SQL, and how am I going to get them to the next stage. So I think that it's been transformative, and I mean, this is obviously not perfect, and it may be a little bit radical, but it's helped us really change the conversation around our planning and making it more about the funnel and the buyer and less about the tactics.
I think that's super. I mean, I'll plug Allocadia a little because I can't help myself, but it's very always nice to have a technology that can help you look at your activities, your investments in different views like that. So there's my plug, but we are hosting the webinar. So, but I think that's really important to think. That's really important to highlight. I want to underline it. Think beyond channel. When I was running marketing at Allocadia, one thing that we did was we would work with our programs team, our marketing programs team and demand team, and we set targets by inquiry on ideal customer profile. So essentially we would look for not a number of leads, not a number of, it would be just generally, we need to get top of funnel engagement from the right buyers, and then taking it the right type of people, and taking that another level, working with great technologies like ZoomInfo to help us do that too. But then taking it another level, how do you look at that almost channel agnostic, or at least a view that is channel agnostic, is what Tess is saying.
I tend to agree with what Tessa was saying. Is like the ultimately outcome will trump anything else. Like if you deliver your number, yeah, they might care if you don't hit the top line, but realistically, like if you have like a 10 million you need to deliver, if you deliver your 10 million or 10 and a half or 11 million, how many you spend on content syndication or SCM, nobody gives a crap. Like it doesn't matter. What matters is, did you spend in proportion to what you outputted? And did you meet the target that you set out for you and your team? And for me, like when we manage up, it's very different. In the last year, I've experienced two different organizations. One was like purely like how many MQL, like leading indicators. The MQL were leading indicators, and we were able to link MQL to revenue. So we're going to say, we need X amount of MQL to get this type of revenue. So we knew that it would take like 90 to 180 days to get that revenue in, and we had the lag time. So we could say that it doesn't matter what activity came in. If you have this at the top, it will turn into that at the bottom over this period of time. If you can monitor and basically like predict that, that's the nirvana of a marketer, is being able to justify that. The challenge that all of us have is agreeing on the attribution model.
Yeah,
and
took the words out of my mouth.
But it's funny. So for me, like when I do attribution model, and we are building a new one here at ZoomInfo, and I've done it at previous companies before, I don't sell it to my sales rep or to my CRO. My first stop is the CFO. It's like you go there, managing up, as far as I'm concerned, you go to a third party. Like the third party is what you're putting in front of them, is it believable? Is it tangible? Have you removed any type of element that could be a food fight for no reason? Any type of was like fuzzy, where if people say like, well, if somebody rolled over my ad on Facebook, I want to attribute dollars because Paul in their accounting department signed a contract with me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not willing to stand in front of our CEO or CFO and justify that. So the hard part for a marketer is to be willing to leave money on the table, to be willing to say, we don't have enough empirical information to truly say this came from marketing. But at the very least, we can say that marketing influenced it, or we cannot say that marketing sourced it. And it's kind of the willingness to leave stuff out there. And as you gain trust, to maybe claim some of it or portions of it as you move along. But it's just hard waters to navigate. And I'm sure Gabe and Tessa have the exact same waters to navigate as I do.
Oh, yes. It is, especially because marketing is, if you think about a pivot table, I think about marketing as being a horizontal, whereas the different sales teams are verticals. And so you have to realize that you have to explain first that, marketing is a different axis, right? It's a different part of the pivot table. And, we've aligned on a last touch attribution model for that reason, because I think it helps bring greater clarity to the conversation.
And I love a good Excel analogy. You're a marketing nerd at heart, I can tell.
Yeah. Where I tend to have a different opinion than Tessa is that my belief is that you need to run a marketing department at scale. You need 3 to 5 different attribution models, depending what you're doing with your department. So I agree with Tessa. In some cases, last touch is great. Maybe if you talk to sales rep or whatever. Yeah. First touch, if you're doing more digital touches, kind of syndication, all that, where you bring in new people. You might look at multi-touch when you're talking about like mixed model or mixed channel. Like
expansion.
I think like you need all of them. You need an array of them. And I tend to index on multi-touch, so I don't over credit one or the other. But I believe that my department needs, I think we are trying to run 5 right now, because we need 5.
That's impressive. No, that's so true, right? Because a customer marketing or cross-sell, upsell attribution is not the same as acquisition. So fair point.
Yeah, and I have a quick question for Gabe, but just one point on this. It's like, I'm a believer that you have a source of truth to a certain extent that you bring to the finance department. That's a handshake of how we're going to model, but then you have multiple different models to make decisions, because first touch versus last touch versus a even weighted versus custom, they're all going to tell you something different and help you make a different type of decision, which ultimately you need that, particularly as you scale a marketing organization, you need those different views.
And a model is not a strategy, right, Sam? So I think that's part of it. A model is a way to communicate and be on the same page and set expectations, but it's not a strategy.
And that's hard to do, or that it is important to do and can be hard to do, to set those expectations.
Yeah. But I think that's a great differentiation. A model is not a strategy. Like for any marketer listening to this, a model is a means to convey part of your strategy, but more explicitly to convey the outcome of your strategy. Your strategy is way upstream from that.
Yes, absolutely. And just to finish this off, Gabe, performance at your, did the expectations change within your organization? Like, was there more scrutiny on ROI or performance? Was there more lenient? Like how did you what changed when it came to the measurement during this?
Say in the nature of my role, just being a little more hands-on with the specific projects, I want to showcase my impact, and I want to show that ROI that is relative and direct into whatever channel it is. Who I report to, our VP of growth, is looking at it more from that bird's eye view, like Tess and Jeremy, whereas I really want to bring my number of, I spent this amount and this is what I generated from that specific campaign. That being said, I'd say that was definitely thrown out the window this last year. I couldn't bring that number to the table like I have been able to do in the past. But with the projects that we're pushing forward, I'd say to Jeremy's point, we do need that sort of multi-touch attribution model incorporated in, because we are trying to morph the two worlds together. So it's a little bit of digital, it's a little bit of maybe in person here shortly. So somehow figuring out how we can attribute that, that's what I love to bring to the table. Haven't been able to, and I missed showing that to our CFO, but hopefully in the near future, we can nail back down into those statistics and metrics.
One of the model, to your point, Gabe, especially if you're reporting to a chief growth officer, we actually introducing one of the model that includes all the sales touches and attributing to the sales touches, because we all know that, first of all, it's very, very solemnly linear. And more importantly, you cannot close anything if sales is not involved, but it's a very often it's a cadence. It's like you have your sales activity, your marketing activity, and they go back and forth. So we're looking at what is the entire cadence from inception to close, including sometimes CS and other department outside of marketing, because you cannot close it. And so we're looking at it, say let's give credit where it's due. Ultimately, we all close the deal and marketing gets $0 of commission, but we cannot close it if sales is not there. Therefore, what are the deals? What is your proportionality to close when sales is involved earlier?
Yeah, no, we're having to lean heavy on our rev ops to make sure that our stacks are all sort of integrated into Salesforce so that we can see just what is doing the job and what isn't. But yeah, it's that alignment that is just so important that in the past we weren't as reliant on, whereas now it's just imperative.
You should call us. We have tools for that.
Jeremy.
Are you sure you don't get a commission, Jeremy? Because I don't know. That was a.
I'm a stockholder like everybody else.
So just to move, one thing to add to this is one thing that we're starting to look at is it even goes beyond sales, and this is somewhat customer journey for us. We're trying to find ways, and we're talking about how we implement this. But how do you track individuals as they move organizations so that you can keep that relationship and that consistency? On the go-to-market or the revenue function, there's people like Jeremy who have bought Allocadia multiple times. And we want to make sure we keep those relationships strong, but there's also a customer experience. We want to know what did they participate in? What did they engage in? How does that carry over so that when there's a new engagement, when they come back, or if they come back, we can keep that context. So it ties into attribution a bit, but it's also kind of Tessa, goes back to one of your initial points. This is channel tactic agnostic, and it's customer journey, customer experience, and it's creating a positive experience for your prospects, your customers, and people who may never buy.
Yeah, long-term versus short-term too, right? Because acquiring a new logo, the runway in 2 years to expand that, that ROI is going to be much different than the immediate result that maybe happened in that, in the month close. So it's interesting. It's we almost need an attribution model for that long-term potential too. So Jeremy, if you could work on that for us, that would be great.
We are.
Oh, okay.
Naturally.
The futures attribution model, something like that.
LTV, predicted LTV.
It's actually Gabe could tell you a lot. There is such a thing with intent.
Yeah, but I'm talking about predicting what that contract will be in 2 years. That's what I'm saying. After you land it. Come on.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Jeremy and Gabe will get working on that. So as they work on it, as they start this up, let's move over to rule number 3 here. So rule number 3, prioritize marketing efficiency. We talk a lot about effectiveness or impact, but there's also an efficiency side. So that's time, that's people, that's money. So, one thing we saw, it's not on this slide, but as the economy picks up again, there's a marketers report that 85% of them, so 85% of marketers are expecting increased marketing spend over the next 12 months. So that's almost 9 out of every 10 marketers. And then at the flip side, when you talk about this efficiency, this is just kind of a cherry pick stat, an example of the lack of efficiency is 60%. So more than half of marketers can't automate the data collection analysis of their marketing programs performance. So you kind of got, you're getting money that's going up, but then you might not be as efficient, whether, again, it comes to the time, people, money, I'd say measurement as well. So I guess, Gabe, I'm going to start with you on this one. So, we've already talked about prioritizing resources for the last year and a half. What have you changed to make sure you're prioritizing on the right things? And bonus, do you see your budget going up?
Yeah, so first, we're growing as a company. So I'd say that's where the resource or the increase that we're seeing. We're still being super diligent and careful about our spend. From day one, we pride ourselves on maintaining sustainability across our organization. So that's constantly in the back of my mind, meaning I'm taking a pretty conservative approach, but we aren't afraid to invest in the long-term commitment. And I'm not talking about like locking in a sponsorship 5 months out. We're more so focused on prioritizing through the specific channel that does increase that long-term commitment of trust and longevity within our pipe, that being channel marketing. So right now we're working on building efficiency as our team grows, focusing on channel marketing as a whole. And then come 2022, we're hoping we'll be a larger, well-oiled machine that's able to do things a little less manually, because we haven't, invested in that whole planning platform that would improve efficiency across the board. We have our tech stack built out as it is. We're trying to leverage the data that exists and use that data to progress the campaigns that we're planning so we can fill the gaps within our pipe.
Awesome, great. Thank you, Tessa. What would you add to that? What have changed for you? Like, how are you planning for, like, how are you prioritizing resources? And then again, bonus. Are you part of that lucky 85%?
I think so. So
you don't want to say too much there.
No, you never know. It's day to day, Sam. Isn't that the whole theme of this? But I think that when we think about time, I'm going to talk about it more from an SDR and sales lens. And I think I mentioned this before. We as marketers, to Jeremy's point, don't close deals. In fact, we don't create opportunities. So I think that in as much as there is, a look at planning and spending as to what you can create from a volume perspective, it's also about what are the mechanisms for data collection so that you can better qualify and improve that conversion along the way. Because every time an SDR or an AE is spending time following up with leads that aren't ready, or leads that you really just only understand that they clicked on emails and downloaded a white paper. In the digital world, that's not really intent. So I think that's where we've really learned that to use resources effectively, we have to have a multidimensional way of scoring leads and then using that to inform where we spend money. Because if we learn a lot more about a prospect simply because the content we're delivering or the experience is multi-touch, that's a much more efficient use of our spend, because we're going to be able to better qualify them. And so it's then becomes a calculation of the, it's like opportunity cost, right? So the spend, we now know that there's a greater likelihood of that buyer to engage with sales and likelihood to buy because they were so much more engaged. And so it's a very nuanced way of looking at it, but it's something I think about every day and night.
So I'm going to move us along because my freestyling is making us run out of time, but I think just to kind of put a fine point on that last comment, I think it's a missed opportunity for B2B marketers to not think about using their SDR and their sales team time as efficiently as possible. Yeah, of course you want to use your dollars efficiently. Of course you want to use your marketing team's time, but the sales reps, it's like if they're working on X deal that's not going to convert, you want them working on the accounts, leads, whatever, with the highest likelihood to convert. I'm sure the Bomboras and Gabes of the world would tell you about that too. So I have one more question. So this is a thank you slide that we'll leave up here, but I do have a question. So for everybody, we'll go around the horn, starting with Tessa, then Jeremy, then Gabe. But what's one learning or improvement you took from 2021 that you would share to our audience that maybe they should consider as they plan, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually?
Volume is a slippery slope. So make sure that you have a multidimensional understanding of your funnel that goes well beyond simply how many people you're putting into it, and considers conversion, time, engagement, potential lifetime value, and so on. And I think that what this year has proven is that the level of sophistication we need as marketers to make smart decisions has really just begun.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeremy, what would you tell our audience to share from your learnings to take away?
My learnings, and so like it's more like career / what was emphasized over the pandemic, is the metrics. Know the booking, the win rate, dollar to pipe, the percentage of opportunity to pipe, conversion. Basically know your shit better than anybody else. Because if you do, then you can actually build trust around your team. But you need to be the expert. And yes, it's going to take a lot of time to explain. You're going to have to do a lot of presentation at different level, which different level of complexity. That's great. That's important. That's the only way you can be. For me, like I support a CMO. I've always supported CMO. You're their right arm. You need to know your stuff so well that they have confidence to walk into any room and saying, this is what we're doing. This is the outcome, and this is what we need X to do more of it.
Great, love that one too. Gabe, bring us home.
I'd say just have a plan to plan, working especially across different departments. So if you can find that needle in a haystack and work in a structure that resonates well with finance, sales, and marketing, run with it and roll that into 2022 planning as things get a little more hectic here. While still incorporating, we're always constantly trying to incorporate intent, especially human intent. I feel like that is something that 2020, 2021 brought to the table, is bringing back a sense of humanity and humility to our work. So adding that element, I think, will keep a strong foundation for marketing, sales, and finance moving forward as we continue to plan.
Awesome. So just to summarize here, multidimensional view of your plan, your budget, etc. Don't look at it a single dimension. It limits you. So that's 1. 2, know your shit, know the metrics, and align. That Jeremy didn't say that directly, but align across the organization on this so that you have the right buy-in. It'll pay you back. And then finally, that idea of planning to plan, the idea of you need to build that muscle, and it can't just be a muscle within the marketing organization, your partners in sales and finance, maybe customer success, who knows? Make sure that you're building that muscle now, because you'll need that, because who knows what's coming down the road. So hopefully I did everyone justice with that summary. Awesome. So before we go, and I'm going to close up here, we're going to pop up a poll. Here, if you want to learn a bit more about Allocadia, just say yes. We'll have somebody follow up with you. You'll get more into the details about what we do and how we can help organizations. Again, we're a SaaS MarTech provider. We help marketing organizations with planning, financial planning, budgeting, and then ultimately that view into investment and performance measurements and metrics. So again, raise your hand if you'd like to learn more. Tessa, Jeremy, Gabe, thank you for your time. This was wonderful. Hopefully everyone in the audience got some great tips. I did, and I always enjoy these conversations.
Thank you, Sam. It was great being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.